Live now.
Okay. So today we're going to talk about pruning. And one of the things that I think we advertised was fall pruning. And you don't prune in the fall. We all want to do it. We have perennials that are starting to look really ugly like this. And you think, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and cut this. This is a very important time for your perennials and everything to gain the strength that they need for next year. So you don't want to do your pruning until they are completely dormant. This is a mist flower. So she's going to go completely down and dormant. And so you will prune her late winter, early spring. I'm saying January, February. Go ahead and leave it like it is until then, and then prune it back. And that's on most of your perennials. Even this is an iris, and it is nasty looking. And they just get really, really ugly looking like this. But this is where the bulb gets its energy. And so you want to leave all of this and let it go dormant naturally. You don't want to cut it back. So if you have these and they're really ugly in your landscape and you don't want to look at them anymore, you can take and you can braid its leaves and that kind of stuff, lay it down to where it's not showing, but definitely let it die back on its own before you ever do any cutting, because that is where it gets all of its stored energy.
So is it going to die if you cut it?
If you cut it, it's not going to die, but you're most likely not going to get blooms next year, because that's where the energy comes from that's going to cause it to bloom next year, is through this dying back on its own. We have lots of shrubs that we have in our landscape that bloom early spring. So that's going to be your forsythia, Indian hawthorn, those kind of guys that are blooming in February, March. You do not prune those. You don't prune them until after their bulb or their bloom cycle. This is a forsythia that's going down for the season, and if I can't show it to you, well, if you look at all of these limbs that have lost their leaves, you can see little buds all along the stem here. And those little buds are going to be the flowers next spring. So if you were to take this and prune it back fall or winter, you're not going to have the blooms that you grow it for. The same thing goes for your Indian hawthorn, camellia, azaleas. They all bloom on their old growth. So anything that blooms on its old growth has to be pruned after the bloom cycle. Yeah. It went right. Okay. And in your little handout, there's a list of your early spring blooming. It's not a complete list because there's just way too much to put on it, but it's a partial list. It kind of gives you an idea. So the forsythia, azaleas, camellias, those kind of things are the early spring, whereas this is an abelia. Abelias bloom on new growth instead of old growth. So you can see you all get these wonderful blooms all around the edge, but you can also see you've got really ugly dieback in here. That's why I brought this one in, is because at any time you can take this guy and you can prune out the dead, and it's not going to hurt it. And just anything that's really ugly looking to you, this limb right here, I would probably prune out. And go in and prune. Yeah, that was a little tough. You're going to go in and prune it to the next branch that's coming out. the diagram that's on there kind of gives you an idea on pruning that if you prune it to the outside, it's going to shoot the new limb up. If you prune it to the inside, it's going to shoot the new limb inside. So if you want something that's a lot more open, airy, you know, with a big canopy, you're always going to prune to where your limbs are going that direction, not going up. If you're trying to keep it more contained, because a lot of us, you know, we accidentally plant something in the wrong spot and it's taking up too much room, but we really like it there. So you can keep it contained with the direction that you're actually pruning and when you're pruning it.
And by that you mean the angle of the cut?
The angle of the cut. And the angle of the cut makes a lot of difference. You never make a flat cut. So when you're pruning, when you decide to go out and prune everything, don't make just a straight cut. You're always going to want to angle your cuts.
I just heard about hot cross buns. That's as far
Is
as
that
I...
good for roses too?
Yes, ma'am.
Angle cut out so they don't end up going in.
Yes, ma'am.
You don't want them to
And you know,
each other like that.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. You always want to prune to the direction that you want the limb to go. Okay, and then always make sure that you prune right underneath a bud. Well, you don't have to share with Callie. You can make her get up. And she did such a good job.
Real quick, I just want to show the people on Facebook
Oh, okay.
what you were talking about. I don't know if they can pick me up on the mic or not, but what she was saying on here.
So what she's going to show you is the buds that I was talking about on the forsythia, and the reason that we don't prune back until after they bloom next year, and then you can do any of your pruning. The buds for the flowers of early spring have already set.
So these
Does that mean
ends here have new growth on them already, is what we're
So
trying to show. So hopefully you can see that and not cut that off.
And not cut that off. Yeah, and don't tinkle on yourself. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I was just so like what you said after they when they bloom, they're going to bloom one time. We don't have those type of plant. I don't think.
Yeah.
Azaleas.
Most of your stuff that blooms on the old growth, you're going to get that one and done kind of thing. The forsythias like that. I'm sorry. I got a fur ball. The forsythia is going to bloom. It blooms for 6-7 weeks, something like that, and then it's over. And at that point, you can cut it back, and to a manageable size, and then it'll grow all summer long. And fall, it'll start setting its buds again. It's the same thing with your Indian hawthorn, the shrub. It blooms and blooms pretty heavy early spring. I'm sorry. I got something down my throat.
Pollen from the plants.
Oh yeah, because I'm playing in them. It's going to bloom early spring, and then after it blooms, you can, cut it back to a manageable size, whatever size you want, and then let it go, and it will set its new buds in the fall again. Azaleas are a little bit different because so many azaleas on the market now are rebloomers, but you're going to have a heavy blush of blooms first thing in the spring. Those are your encore azaleas. So after they have that heavy bloom, you can go ahead and shear them back some or cut them back some. They do rebloom. They're just not going to bloom as heavy the second and third time that they bloom. So you don't get that heavy bloom that you get first thing in spring. But it's not going to damage it to do that. Wait until the blooms are gone, and then you can do a pruning of it, and you'll be okay. Beautyberry. I don't know if any of y'all grow beautyberry. Beautyberry. Beautyberry is another thing that it blooms in the summer. And so you can actually, I would wait until the berries are off because the birds love them. But beautyberry is one of those things that you can prune in the fall or in January or February, and then it will grow. You'll get your blooms, and then you'll get the beautiful berries and that. So that's one that you will go ahead and cut back in January or February. Your perennials, once they've gone completely dormant, you can cut back, but you want to make sure that they've gone completely dormant. That's kind of hard here in Texas or in where we're at, because sometimes we don't get a complete dormancy out of a lot of our perennials.
Gem line one, please.
But you kind of know in January or February it's done all the storing that it's going to do, and it'll just rejuvenate it. So some of our stuff just goes semi-dormant, kind of like our Artemisia. And Artemisia, it's not going to die completely back, but it can get really rough looking. And so if you take it and you prune it back in January or February, you're going to get a lot prettier plant in spring.
What about things like autumn sage or like Salvia grado? Ours is really huge. When do we trim that?
January, February, prune it back. In the middle of the summer, you'll get beautiful blooms in early spring and that, and then it kind of dies back and you don't have a whole lot of blooms. If you can cut it back at that point by about 6 inches, not do any damage to it, and then it's going to reflush and it's going to bloom for you again. So every time that you get a big flush of bloom and then it kind of stops, you can give it a 6-inch haircut, and it encourages it to bloom heavy again.
So that's every one, right?
Every time that it starts looking ugly again. So it's probably going to be 2, maybe 3 times a season for it. But I would say now, usually if you do a July, 1st of August trim back, you'll get a really pretty flush of growth right now and bloom right now. And then wait until January, February, and then you can cut it. You can cut it all the way back to where it's 6 inches tall if you want to, and make it start all over again. Don't do that until we're in January or February when it's the most dormant for you.
So we shouldn't trim it back if it starts to look bad now.
I wouldn't.
Okay.
I would let it go until January.
And we can cut it pretty short.
And then you can cut it pretty short and start really massing it. Because one of the things with our salvias is if we just let it be and it gets kind of lanky looking.
That's the way ours are.
And so if you'll cut them back in January or February every year, they're going to get a lot more compact and become a bigger, nicer plant for you.
Is that the autumn sage you're talking about?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. All of no. The autumn. It's a salvia. Yeah. 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 Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Is Russian sage the same way?
Russian sage is the same way.
Because I want it to get
Really full.
ready right now.
Yeah.
Just planted
Yeah.
this summer, so
So wait until January, then go ahead and cut it to where it's, and then probably, because Russian sage blooms a little bit different, but it's still, you'll have a heavy blooming. Can you get me a drink of water? You'll have a heavy bloom and then you'll have cycles, but it does bloom on new growth. So if you'll give it a short haircut, it'll stimulate that new growth and then you'll get a better bloom cycle. The reason that I'm telling you not to cut back the salvia right now is anytime that we give them haircuts like that, it's going to stimulate new growth. And if you stimulate that new growth and then we get a freeze, it's going to do damage, and you don't want to do damage to it. So any pruning that you're doing right now, it would be maintenance pruning. Sorry. So if you had a dead limb, or if you had a limb that's sticking out over the sidewalk and you don't want people stepping on it, you know, you can prune those off without any damage. But to actually do the true pruning of it, wait until it's dormant.
Okay, so my next question is on the hydrangea. I have a limelight hydrangea that's been grown up into like a tree.
Uh-huh.
So when or can I prune that one?
Do not, that one, yeah. She has a limelight hydrangea, and she's asking when to prune it. So with the limelight, it grows on new growth. So as soon as it stops, because you should have blooms right now, right?
I cut them off and put them in my house.
Oh, you did? Okay. So it's blooming right now. So as soon as they stop blooming, you can go ahead and since yours is treed and you want to keep it in a certain shape, as soon as it loses all of its leaves, probably January again, and goes dormant, then you can go ahead and give it its haircut because it's going to bloom on new growth. Now, hydrangeas are kind of tricky because you have like your limelight, endless summers, those guys that are repeat bloomers, and repeat bloomers bloom on new growth, so they can be pruned back in January, February. And then you have your old fashions that ruby slippers is one of them, that they bloom on old growth, so you can't you can't prune those back until they finish blooming for you. Yes, ma'am.
About hydrangeas, I just bought one this year and planted it. How do I know it's happy where it is in my garden? Like,
Okay, she wants to know how she knows if her hydrangea is happy in its spot.
new spot.
Um,
Brought it.
So how has it thrived so far?
Well, when I bought it, it had blooms on it, but
Mhm.
now it's not.
How do the leaves look?
Kind of bare, but it's a baby, right?
So did the leaves after you plant it kind of turn brown and drop off, or did they stay on and they've slowly changed color and started dropping?
It looks spindly, but
Yeah. Well, and one of the things is when we plant something, we can expect miracles out of it. Our perennials, trees, shrubs, anything that you put in the ground, the first year it sleeps, the second year it creeps, the third year it leaps, and it does leap on that third year, and you're going to wish, oh, I wish I'd have put that in a bigger spot. But so the first year, all you're doing is babying it and getting its roots established. Make sure that your leaves aren't turning yellow when they shouldn't be. Make sure that they're not turning brown when they shouldn't be, and you know it's happy. Hydrangeas like a very acidic soil, so you do need to be adding acidic matter. We have Command Compost Plus that has elemental sulfur in it that makes a really good top dressing for any of our really acidic loving plants.
It's just around those because I don't want to do that to the whole flower bed, right?
Yes, you can just put it, just mulch. You're just going to put it around those areas. And that way it keeps the acidity up and it's going to make it a little happier. Hydrangeas also, they like a little bit more water, but they do not like keeping their feet wet. Okay? So a lot of us will get the hydrangeas and it'll be in the middle of August, and all of a sudden the leaves look like they're falling down at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and you think, oh my God, it needs a drink of water. It doesn't. It's perspiring. So we need to watch that because it can get root rot. Watch that the next morning, go out. If his leaves are still sagging the next morning, it needs a drink of water. It is not going to hurt it to go water. You can do more damage overwatering it than underwatering it. Yes, ma'am.
Does it help? Because I've heard from many people to put shale rock in the bottom before you even plant the hydrangea.
Uh-huh.
Prevent that root rot.
Yeah. So she's asking about expanded shale with the hydrangeas. I like using expanded shale in any hole that you use. Expanded shale works really well at keeping, it holds the water, but it also keeps the water off the root of the plant. It aerates our soil. A lot of us have that really ugly clay soil. I know here in this area, y'all have some sandy soil, but expanded shale will work in both types of soil. So I think it's a great additive. They've actually grown roses directly in expanded shale, and the roots will go in, find all the little crevices, that kind of stuff, and they've grown fine just in straight expanded shale.
Is that better than the lava?
The lava sand and green sand are doing different things than expanded shale. Expanded shale is actually like a little rock that has been cooked at such a high temperature it pops, and it makes it very porous. The green sand and the lava sand are putting minerals and stuff back into our soils. What are you trying to do? You don't You're learning. When we have very compacted soils and that kind of stuff, we suggest people use the lava and the green and humate. It kind of helps break down that clay to where it's a little more aerated. We don't suggest expanded shale on top of compacted because it needs to be able to get into the soil. But the lava and the green sand will work its way in. So it's a little different, guy.
Did you say acidity soil or acidity treatment on top of the?
It's called Command Plus. It has elemental sulfur, and it raises the acidity around your acid-loving plants. Sulfur works that way. It has peat in it, some other organic matter, but it also has the elemental sulfur in it, and that really helps with, it helps with our hollies. Hollies like being a little more acidic. We have a very alkaline soil. So your hollies, your azaleas, camellias, hydrangeas, it sounds like anything that ends with seems like it lacks acid. So like gardenias, those kind of things. All of them like a higher acid, and you can top dress with this stuff, and it kind of kills two birds with one stone.
When do you want to do that?
Huh?
When do you want to lay that down?
I would do it twice a year. I would do it early spring. I'd do it again in the fall. Because what we're doing, since you're not using a chemical, since you're using an organic matter, you're treating your soil and making your soil more acidic.
Coffee grounds are supposed to do that too.
Yes, they are, but you can over coffee a plant. So, a lot of us drink a lot of coffee, and if you take and put that coffee ground on the plants every day, then you're going to have a problem. And that's kind of like earthworm castings. I didn't think you could ever get enough earthworm castings, but I have beds that my worms are really active in, and I've burnt up ferns and that kind of stuff in earthworm castings, and I didn't think they were that hot, but They are. So, yes,
I
ma'am.
have a leaf question.
Yes, ma'am.
I've heard two different stories. One that you do not want to keep leaves, like I've got 80 oak trees, and you don't want to keep leaves in your flower bed because it keeps the water from getting down into the ground. And then the other thing I heard was that leaves are good for fertilizer. I don't know, for like in place of mulch, use leaves.
Depends on the type of leaf. I know post oaks give
Oaks and live oaks.
give off a, what is it that they give off? It's almost like a herbicide. And so it can actually do some damage to it. So you might not want to use those. But if you have maples and other guys, it does not hurt for them to lay, especially over winter, because it'll keep the bed kind of warm. It keeps it loose, keeps some of the moisture in. You never want to go into a freeze dry, so it helps hold moisture. And then clean them early spring and clean them out. What? It takes a long time for a live oak leaf to break down, and so it just winds up being a little trashy.
So I'd be better off with mulch and stuff.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
What about cutting lavender? I've got a huge lavender plant that's taken over a little space,
Uh-huh.
and it's really huge and it looks good. But should I ever trim it? I read about just trimming them all like down, like to 6 inches.
Mm-hmm. So she wants to know if she should trim lavender down that has gotten really, really big.
It's like a shrub.
It's like a shrub now. I wouldn't trim it down to 6 inches
Yeah.
like that. I would wait until probably January again, and I would cut it maybe by 50%. Okay? That's going to, and cut it to the shape that you want. You know, if you want it to be kind of a round mound, you can do that, or you can thin it out in the middle and make it a little more open and airy. But don't go over 50% with it, because it sounds like it's a big, beautiful plant.
Yeah, it is.
What kind of lavender is it?
It's English, and then we planted other lavenders that are surviving, but they're small. Can we move the lavenders around?
Yes, ma'am.
If they're not-
Wait until January. Pick them up, move them, then make sure that you're doing a root stimulator. Once you move it, make sure you're hitting it with root stimulator. I kind of like seaweed myself, but use a root stimulator and do that probably once every 3 weeks for about 2-3 months, just to get the roots really going again, because it is going to kind of set it back. It's going to think that it's in year one, you know, even if it's a 3-year-old plant. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
Camellia. I have a camellia bush, and I think it's in its 3rd year, and it wasn't happy where I first planted it, so I moved it.
Mhm.
And it's in a shadier spot now.
Mhm.
And the plant's looking really good. How long does it take them to bloom? It's never bloomed the whole time I've had it.
Okay, she has a camellia that wasn't happy in one spot, and she's picked it up and moved it. The plant is big and beautiful, but it's never bloomed.
It's not big, but it's
It's beautiful. It's happy now. I would say, have you been fertilizing?
yes.
You fertilize? The other thing is,
Acid soil stuff around it.
so you are keeping it done like that. The other thing is some of the camellias will, I don't know which one it is, but it will set its buds, and you don't really see the buds. They start to open around January, February, and a lot of people, they're just starting to open. We get a freeze, and it freezes those buds off, and you don't get flowers, and you never really realize it. So if you have it, and we're going to get a freeze in January, February, just put a frost blanket over it and see if you get buds this year or blooms this year. Like Yuletide blooms a little earlier. It blooms in December or so. So it's not as likely not to bloom. But a lot of those big, beautiful ones will set their buds and get just ready to bloom when we get that late freeze that we always get in February, March, sometimes as late as Easter in April. And about the time that they're going to open up and really, they've started cracking, it freezes and it causes their buds to drop. So
Would you repeat those 3 words? You said the first year it does this, the second year.
the first year it sleeps, the second year it creeps, and the third year it leaps.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. I don't know why, but that's something that when I was going through all of my master gardening classes, it was something that the extension guy had said, and it just stuck in my head. And it really is true. Annuals, you put them in the ground, they go. But it's because they're not going to live. The things that are really trying to set down their roots and live for you, they have to go through that little thing. Is there anything else?
Can you repeat one more time? What did you say? If you prune on the inside, it grows on the outside.
It depends on the angle that you cut. If you're cutting, if you take here, come, and it's just breaking. If you prune this guy to where you're pruning it this direction, okay? Now his new growth is going to go this way. If you prune him that direction, he's going to go that way, okay?
Got it.
Does that help? Huh? It grows in the direction that you're pruning. So if you're, can you see? If you're pruning it this direction, now your new growth will go this way. If you prune it this direction, it's going to go this way for you. So when you're pruning, depending on what you're trying to accomplish, if you're trying to get it to grow out and be more airy, you're going to want to point it that way. If you want it more column-like and that, then you're going to point it to the inside. Okay.
What about flowering perennials? As they look dead, just small perennial flowering plants.
Uh-huh.
Do you trim those if you see?
Yeah, you can deadhead them as they go, but remember that if you deadhead, it's not going to be setting its seeds, like coneflower.
Right.
Okay, the coneflower, the flower actually needs to turn brown up there and dry a little bit, so that it's naturally releasing its seeds.
So you'll have that in the ground,
Yeah.
But what about dead, like leggy?
Dead leggy stuff, as you're seeing that dead leggy stuff, go ahead, cut it off. One of the things is when you start getting dead dieback, that kind of stuff, the plant tries to heal that. And so it puts energy into fixing the problem, kind of like we do when we break something or cut. And if you take it off, then the rest of the plant can go ahead and thrive. So at any time you can do that. Yes, ma'am.
When you trim like the coneflower, when you let those seeds fall down, does that replant for next year?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So you're actually getting new plants if you allow the flower to go ahead and sit on top, the seeds to dry and the seeds to fall off, then you're getting new plants from those seeds. But you'll also have your original coneflower.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Died on me, so I don't know what it did.
Now they really like having a drier environment.
That's what happened.
Yeah, you think that it needs a little bit more water, but it doesn't. We've got coneflowers that are growing out in our front butterfly garden, and I didn't realize that the sprinklers weren't working in it, and so it became a very dry bed. But the milkweed, everything that we had in it for the butterflies seemed to thrive except for celosia. So just back off. Most stuff that has set its roots down only have to be watered like twice a week, and the equivalent of an inch of rain per week. So if we're getting rain, you don't need to be subsidizing it. And that's on our perennials, that's on our, annual flowers, that's a little bit different. But our grasses, our perennials, trees, shrubs, Mother Nature does a really good job of taking care of it until we get to August. And then we need to be, subsidizing. And, but you want long, deep waterings. You don't want this 5-minute watering and then going away. You want that water, you want water to about a 6-inch depth. That way your roots are all the way down and not getting scalded. They can thrive better. They can maintain themselves better.
And that's every day.
No, ma'am. That's twice a week. Yes, ma'am.
I have a Chardonnay plant. Are you familiar with Chardonnay plant?
I am not.
Okay. I didn't know if
What is it?
I don't know. That's all I know.
Okay. Yeah, no, it does not sound familiar. So
It's a green plant. It has pretty white flowers on it. That's all I remember.
yeah. Okay.
I don't know when to prune it. That's when it's green and it has no flowers on it now. So I
Yeah.
don't know when in January.
Yeah. If it blooms in the latter part of summer, you think it's spring? If it's blooming early spring, then prune it after it blooms. Okay? If it's blooming summer and fall, then you can prune it in the winter. Does that make sense?
Blooms in spring. I gotta get this.
If it blooms early spring, you prune after it blooms. If it blooms midsummer, I'm saying June and on, then you prune it in January or February.
So you always prune after it blooms.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Like a month or two after it blooms, or is there a rule? Or?
No. There's not really a hard set rule for it. I'm going to have to look up the plant now because, there's so many of them. I can't remember all of them, but
Talk to me about, I had that little pink, cute little flower, but it's a climber. So how are you pruning to get, like, it was this small, now it's
When I-
starting to climb, so.
when I looked at it, I think I saw rock rose.
Yes, it's some kind of...
Okay, a rock rose, it's not actually a climber, but rock rose can get, even though it looks like a small, cute perennial, they can get 3-4 foot wide and tall if you let them go.
Getting longer.
So it's getting longer and longer.
Yes.
Go ahead and it's going to die back. So in January, you're going to cut it all the way back. And then spring, you'll get really heavy bloomings, and then you'll get sporadic bloomings the rest of the time. And so if you get those long limbs and it's somewhere that you don't want it, just cut that limb off.
Well, what I'm doing is I'm putting it on this wire thing, and I'm trying to get it to grow up.
Uh-huh.
So I'm trying to,
You're trying to train it up?
yeah. So it's
Um,
like a pretty,
It's not going to do like a true vine would do. It's not going to be like training your well, ivies don't bloom, but I'm thinking trumpet vine. Okay, so trumpet vine, you can train it, it goes dormant, but it comes back to life on that limb. Your rock rose is part of it's going to die back, and so it's going to be kind of hard for you to train it into something.
so every year then I've got to tape it.
Every
back
year you're going to
on
have to take it back up. Yes,
Okay.
as it grows. But you can make it, you can make it go into the trellis or into the wire cage, whatever you want to do. But you're just going to have to do it again each year. And that way it keeps it contained instead of big and wide and all over the place.
Braiding it.
You're braiding it.
The Chardonnay plant is patented by Proven Winners. It's a new plant.
Is it
Patented by
is it a annual or is it a perennial?
It didn't even say.
It didn't?
It likes full sun.
Okay. Okay. I'll have to do some more research on it, but is there anything else I can? Yes, sir.
What do you do with pine needles?
Leave them under your pine tree.
Okay.
They're a very good source of acidity. Your pine trees like having an acidic environment. And it also, I mean, it keeps pine needles are awesome for mulch. It keeps a really good mat down. Other things do not like growing through the pine needles.
For a flower garden, pine needles?
Yes, they are. They are. So if you have a pine source, it's really nice. We haven't been able to get them in this year. But a lot of people really liked having their pine needles and keeping them around. Keeping them around the pine tree is the big thing.
You said that hydrangeas really like acidic soil.
Yes, sir. You can use the pine needles around your hydrangeas.
The other thing, how do you kill a cut vine? You know, the little thing that grows up, and then the root goes down to China.
Yeah. Try 30% vinegar. Is it in full sun or is it in shade?
They're everywhere.
They're everywhere. Try 30% vinegar.
And that won't hurt the plants.
That's going to it's a contact kill. It doesn't know, so it's going to kill anything. So when you do it, you're going to have to spray it on each one of those vines.
You don't want it to get on the rest of the plant.
Yeah, you don't want to spray it on its neighboring.
Because it's like, they're weaving in it.
Yeah, yeah. You find where it's going to the ground, and then treat it there. Make sure that when you're doing the 30% vinegar that you're putting an ounce of orange oil and a few drops of liquid soap in it. That's all you do, and then you spray.
What kind of vine is that?
It's a cut vine. It's like a weed.
I have that. I
But
think
they
I-
like,
Little viney thing that grows up
But they
over about
actu-
6 inches
but
up.
they
at the
actually
end.
wrap around and they can actually
Yeah.
peel off.
I think you're calling it what I call bindweed. Does it put on a pretty little purple blossom?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I call it bindweed, but it does. It binds up everything that it wraps around. And they're very difficult to get rid of. You know, you can go down there and think that you're pulling it, and the next thing you know, in 3 or 4 days, you've got another one coming up.
It'll pull up until you get to the mother root that goes down to China.
Yeah, yeah. And that's where I would spray that 30%.
So you said orange oil.
Yes. It's 30% vinegar, which we have over here, 1 ounce of orange oil, and 2 or 3 drops of liquid soap.
So how much vinegar do you put?
30%.
You're doing that to the full gallon. It comes in a gallon. You're going to add 1 ounce of orange oil to that gallon,
Oh, I see.
2 or 3 drops, because you don't dilute it. I mean, you're using it straight.
Oh, I see.
And that way it adheres to whatever you're putting it on, and it helps kill it.
The orange oil just makes it adhere to things? Is that what-
The soap is what's causing it to stick. The orange oil, if you've ever gotten straight orange oil on you, you know it burns. And the vinegar will burn the plant down to the root structure.
Does it work on those blades of grass that come up? They look like grass, but they're also.
Nutsedge? No, ma'am.
Is that what that is?
Yeah. I
call it nutgrass. Or
yeah.
How do you get rid of that?
You
There
can't.
is no way.
It's one of those things that you can dig to China. You will not get all the nuts, and you will get more.
I think the more that you weed it, though, the less you have.
Well, that's
Yeah. The biggest thing is it likes water, and so maybe don't water as much, and it might slow it down. I don't know how to kill it. I don't know how to kill it organically. I don't know how to kill it chemically, because even the chemical
Bob said it didn't work.
doesn't work. So
It grows. The is so little teeny, it's hair like thin, connecting to the others that are popping up everywhere.
And there's little bitty nuts all the way through there. Nuts. And so when you pull it, the nuts stay in the ground.
Wait, are you talking about the straight shoot ones? There's nuts on them?
And when you pull it, the nuts stay in there. And for every one that you pull, you probably got 5 new ones.
Because you're pulling the nuts.
Because the nuts are staying in the ground. Yes, ma'am.
On milkweed,
Yes, ma'am.
little black spots all over the leaves. What is that?
The little black spots are probably butterfly eggs.
Tiny little black spots?
Mm-hmm.
It could also be just poop from
From the
the butterfly.
from the butterfly. It can either be eggs or it can be potty. So
It's not, what do aphids look like?
aphids you will definitely see, and the ones that seem to be attracted by the milkweed are actually a little green aphid.
Okay, so they're big enough to see.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
They'll move. If you
Yeah.
scrape them off and put them on your finger, they'll move around.
Yeah.
That's how
Looks
you
like
know.
headlights.
Exactly. A little bit bigger, but yeah, they do look like headlights.
But ladybugs work really well on aphids.
They do.
They do. They work great.
Good, I have some ladybugs.
Yeah, but ladybugs will also eat the caterpillar larva.
Yes.
So I recommend that leave your butterfly weed alone. Any kind of milkweed that you have, don't try to do anything to it. We had aphids all over our milkweed out there, and we didn't treat it with anything. We just left the aphids there. The aphids are probably still out there sitting on the plant. Didn't do any damage to the butterfly weed at all.
Yeah.
But we don't want to do anything that might harm the monarchs.
Right.
So if you spray anything on that, the caterpillar is going to consume the
Yeah.
poison and die. Or if not die, have birth defects when it transforms into a butterfly.
The soap and water hurt them? The soap and water hurt them?
Soap and water will kill the caterpillar as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
So it's better if you do nothing. The butterflies are really sensitive to any kind of herbicide at all, even the very mild ones like the soap. So it's better to just, if you want the monarchs, leave the milkweed alone, ignore the fact that it has insects on it, and let nature deal with it, because anything you put on that milkweed is potentially going to hurt the butterfly.
When they got really heavy on one of our plants, I just went out there with my fingers and slid and squished them. Yeah. Yeah.
The snail, those little snails.
Yes, ma'am.
I've got milkweed in a pot and milkweed in the ground. And the one in the pot seems to do better than the one in the ground. Anybody know why that is?
It might be just that the ground you don't have as much organic matter in as the pot. The pot you use potting soil, and the ground you just got it in your native soil, and so it could be that it just has more of the organic matter that it needs.
Did I hear you say that the ladybugs will even eat the monarch larvae?
Yes, ma'am.
You
And
don't
the
really-
eggs, yeah.
Okay, so you don't really want to use ladybugs if
Yeah.
it's a plant that typically.
Well,
brings
the
in.
only thing is they do prefer aphids. But yes, potentially the ladybugs will eat the monarch babies as well. Yeah.
Is there anything else I can tell y'all?
I have one last question about my star jasmine.
Yes, ma'am.
It's in a planter, and I'm pretty sure, overgrown the planter. I'm pretty sure that the vines need to be freed.
Mm-hmm.
So how do I get it out of that planter and put it in the ground?
Just you can just lift it up and if it she has a star jasmine that is outgrown its pot, and so she wants to know about how to put it in the ground. So what I would do is I would take it out of the pot. If you're right and it's root bound, if you will loosen the roots up to where they're not circling or doing any of that, and then put it back into the ground this time. And just make sure that you use your root stimulator, because anytime that we disturb a root structure, we want to make sure that we're using root stimulator. Okay, when you do plant it in the ground, I would use a little bit of earthworm casting and maybe your expanded shell.
Okay, what kind of soil would you get for that? Because my soil's crappy. I have to buy soil every time I plant anything.
Any really good organic matter. You could use cotton burr, which is really, really good, and you're going to mix it 50-50.
Cotton burr?
Uh-huh.
It's pretty good.
It's a cotton burr compost.
That's also very acidic.
It's real stinky.
And it's also very acidic too. But if you will dig your hole, dig it a little bit bigger, half of your native soil get rid of, put in cotton burr, mix it up really well, and then put your plant in.
And is there any specific time that's better for that on the star jasmine?
Your star jasmine is an evergreen, so just go ahead and do it now.
Okay.
You know, it'll give it a little bit of time before it freezes to establish some roots.
Do we want to start putting the mulch down now?
Yes, ma'am. Clean your beds out, put down new mulch, get it all ready for it to go to bed in the winter. Yeah.
But don't cut anything.
Don't cut anything yet. Wait until January, February. I'm sure we'll have another class, because I have a class on please don't murder your crepe myrtles. And everybody seems to like that we talk about not murdering our crepe myrtles, and we talk about fruit tree pruning and some other things. So there will be another class for you. And anytime you have a question, come in. I mean, we'll answer anything you want.
I do have a crepe myrtle question.
Yes, ma'am. Did you murder it?
No,
Okay.
but this is at my house.
Uh-huh.
It's very shady because it's got like 80-something trees.
Uh-huh.
So I've got several crepe myrtles, and they're all like really skinny and hardly any little blooms. They got a little bloom here and a little bloom there.
Yeah. You're not going to get anything out of it. Crepe myrtles want full sun.
Should I just have them dug up or?
Yeah, I would. I mean, if you've got an area where you've got like, okay, there's a 4 foot by 4 foot area that gets sun all the time, pick it up and move it over there. Yeah, with that many trees, crepe myrtle's just not going to thrive. And the thing about it is, if it's sitting under the shade, it might limp along, but it's going to be so weak that every fungus, every insect, every disease is going to attack it, because it's just not thriving. So it's
One of the home builder would have done that.
Don't care.
home builders plant what they can get the cheapest. Okay? They have a builder package, and that's probably one of the things in the builder package. They don't. Tammy, be sweet. Okay. I'm sorry. I really shouldn't talk bad.
Do you have a certain mulch that you recommend? Or?
Mulch?
Yeah.
Mulch is a very thing. You know, some people like the hardwood mulch. Some people like cedar because it's fragrant. Some people like colored mulch. So, you know, it's kind of a personal thing. Me personally, I use hardwood.
So you just want to put it on like in the, let your beds rest in the winter. It doesn't.
I use hardwood. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
What about the dyed mulch? Like when it rains does that dye hurt the plants at all?
The colored mulches that we have are it's not colored with a dye, it's colored with food.
Soy.
Soy.
They use a soy-based food coloring. Now, not all mulches. There are colored mulches where they use chemicals
Yeah.
to color the mulch. The ones that we buy are soy-based colors. So they are organic. They are safe for your garden, but you should
And they don't bleed.
go to Lowe's. So you're probably gonna get one that uses a chemical coloring.
All of your Scott's colored mulches are chemical. Scott's. Yeah, the Scott's brand is a chemical dye, and they bleed. So you put red mulch on your bed, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. And it rains, and you have red dye running down your concrete or your whatever it is. So it's not fun. But ours is soy based, and it holds really well.
So I've gone organic
Mhm.
this season. But here's the thing. I noticed that I was getting a lot of fire ants, and I got bitten so bad I got mad, and I went and got a killer
Ah,
on the fire ants.
yeah.
Well, there was a fire ant mound right in my garden, and everything's been going great. The lizards, the bumblebees. I'm like, this is wonderful. Did I infect my soil, and now
Depends on what you used.
kind of
But
white powder, I
if
know
you
it.
used it,
on the mound, but still.
Uh-huh. yeah, if you used it in a limited area, just on the mound, I wouldn't worry about it too much. If you apply something, you
No.
know, like a chemical sprayer comes in and insect control company comes in and sprays your whole yard, that's different than just putting.
Okay, because
Something.
Then spot tree.
I'm hoping that my flower bed isn't infected because I did that.
It depends on what you use. Some of the chemical fire ant killers are actually not that bad because they target fire ants,
Okay.
and so they're not going to wipe out your entire micro life like some products would.
Do we have organic?
There is an
fire?
organic fire ant mound drench. We have actually several.
Okay.
We do.
We also have an organic bait.
How about the dry molasses?
Molasses.
I've used it.
By
I've used it on my
yeah,
garden. It's like the-
By itself, it's not going to do.
molasses. Not molasses.
Molasses isn't going to kill or deter fire ants. If you don't have fire ants and you put molasses down to feed your soil, the fire ants aren't as apt to come back in because it's a sweet. A fire ant likes putrid. So you're not going to have as much come into your yard because you have this sweet base
And
on
did
it.
you say it takes how many years is it going to take for me to slowly get rid of the petroleum-based products?
Oh, that sounds like Tom talked to her.
I've been to a couple of these now,
It
but
depends on exactly how much you've been putting and stuff like that, but 6 months to a year.
so in one season,
And if you put charcoal, any kind of charcoal-based product down, the Miramichi Green or the biochar, the charcoal will soak or absorb
Yes.
the toxins, and that will help to rebuild, the.
I've been
the
doing all of
microlife.
that on the grass, but I haven't been doing too much inside the flower bed itself,
If you're doing
other than the molasses liquid.
Yeah,
to
if you're doing your
fertilize.
whole lawn, then you're a chemical person. If you're doing your whole lawn, that's most of your yard.
No.
Oh no.
organic.
She's doing organic in her lawn, but she hasn't really been working on the beds. Anything that you put in your lawn, you can put in your bed. Okay, it's not going to hurt anything.
Okay, because that weed stuff I haven't been putting in.
The corn gluten.
Yeah, the
Corn gluten actually, it has a little bit of nitrogen in it. The only thing that I'm going to tell you is don't put it down and then decide that you're going to plant wildflower seeds.
See, that's
Because
my
that is going to keep those seeds from germinating. So as long as you're doing perennials and plants that are already up and going, it does not hurt to use any kind of pre-emergent.
Okay, well, I've been trying to sprinkle Texas wildflowers in my flower garden.
Okay,
so I
don't.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
do not use.
But
Do
I
not.
can use that liquid corn molasses that up.
You can use the liquid molasses. You can use any of the organic fertilizers that we have. Fish emulsion is great. You can use Yum Yum. Yum Yum is a really, really good fertilizer that we carry. And all of that stuff is fine. Just stay away from the corn gluten.
Okay.
Okay?
Got it.
So the corn gluten meal will prevent the corn flour seeds from.
Yes, ma'am. It's going to keep any. It can't distinguish one seed from another, and so it's going to keep any seed from germinating for at least 60 days.
I've been on the fire ant beds. I've been using the rosemary oil.
Rosemary oil?
The oil drink, rosemary oil drink.
Mm-hmm.
Have that here.
Mm-hmm.
That works great.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Is fish emulsion and fish oil the same thing?
No.
You said, okay.
No. You got fish emulsion is where they've taken the fish and emulsified it. Fish oil
It's an extract.
is an yeah.
The
Fish oil you use what for what?
fish oil you consume for your heart and stuff like that. It's a vitamin.
Did I say fish oil?
No, you said fish emulsion.
Okay.
But no, I have some plant stuff like that. Like I think it came from here. One of your sales, fish oil. There's a bottle of fish oil about this.
Liquid fish is what you're thinking of.
Yeah.
That's-
It's not actually the oil.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the fish emulsion is going to have fish oil in it, but it's not just the oil. The oil is extracted and separated from the rest of the fish, and that's what they make the pills out of that you take for your heart and stuff. The fish emulsion is like the bones and the scale and the eyeballs and
all the gross stuff.
Smells great.
Yeah, it does.
And emulsify it.
That's a fertilizer.
It's a
correct?
fertilizer.
Yes, ma'am.
It's for fertilizer.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
All righty.
Thank you.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Thank y'all for coming in.
You want to say conclude your
Bye, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to come and ask Joyce.